guys, what's up? My name is Lauren Danielle. If this is the first time you're seeing my face, welcome to my channel. Today, if you can tell by the title of the video, I am going to be filming my pros and cons with my natural birth and pros and cons of my epidural birth. So before I get started, I did want to say that I am going to be doing a mini Q&A at the end of the video. I asked you guys over on my Instagram if you had any questions, so make sure to follow me on there because I tend to try to get people involved over on Instagram. That's probably my most used social media. But before there was a couple of questions that I answered that I'm going to answer in the pros and cons. So I didn't answer every single one of your guys' questions, and some of them were like, what is it called? Some of y'all asked the same questions. So yeah. So I guess we will start off with my epidural birth because that is what I had first with my first little girl, Blake. She's 3 years old. So 3 years ago, I had an epidural at a hospital. So I guess we can start off with the pros of that. So the pros of that was, it was a longer, by the way, I have a little notebook written down right here that I'm glancing at. It was a longer hospital stay. That was a pro. I did feel a little bit rushed with the birthing center, but it wasn't that bad. But if you're somebody that likes to relax and everything, there was a 6 hour, we had to be out after I had her, we had 6 hours until we had to leave, just like with insurance wise and everything. So that was a pro. Definitely, I know some people would care more about this than others. So that was one pro for epidural. The next pro I had is you had more room to visit. In the birthing center, you literally only had your room. There wasn't a waiting room if you didn't want everybody in there while you're actually giving birth. There's nowhere for them to actually wait. So that was a pro of a hospital. There's a waiting room. There's multiple waiting rooms. There's a lot of room in the hospital room, and there's just a lot more room for people to sit. And in the birthing center, there was literally only one chair and the bed. So there wasn't a lot of room for people to visit. And I think they do that on purpose since you're only there for 6 hours. And we didn't really have people visiting at the birthing center. We waited for people to come to our house when we got home. And then the last pro I have, so I had 3 pros for epidural, was you can sleep during contractions. If you've ever had a natural birth, then it is very tiring. It is very tiring. Like, I can't even say that enough. That's probably the part where you gotta really like think, I'm so tired, I have a lot more to go, how am I gonna do this? So you can sleep through contractions if you're given an epidural. That's what I did because of and totally my labor was different than I had a 21-hour labor versus a 6-hour labor. So the cons of a hospital birth was a longer stay in the hospital. Preferably for me, I didn't mind the birthing center that we had to be out in 6 hours. I know that can be a pros and cons for some people, so I did want to just put that in there. Personally, I didn't mind being rushed out and not having to stay in the hospital. I really didn't like the fact that I had to stay in the hospital for 2 days. By 24 hours, I was done with everybody coming in and out of my room. So a con was a longer hospital stay. Another huge one for me, which is why I just kept pushing it, that I wanted to do a natural birth so bad, was I could not feel a thing. And I hated the fact that I couldn't feel a thing. I couldn't feel what I was doing. I was literally having people to tell me when to push. I had to get a catheter. It's just not something I enjoyed. I 110% would have rathered feeling everything, knowing what I was doing, and being in control. I'm a person that I hate not being in control of a situation. So with the epidural, you're not in control at all. So if you're like me and you like being in control of situations, then natural birth is probably for you. You couldn't move. And not just obviously while you're giving birth or while you're in labor, but for a little while after. And actually I don't remember if it was my right or left side, but one side came back. I got feeling in it before the other. So it was super, super weird. And I did not like how I could only feel one side versus the other. And you hear all these horror stories about people going into like getting paralyzed, and y'all, I was freaking out. I was not safe back then. and the worry and fear got a hold to my mind. But I did not like personally how I couldn't move. Again, that goes along with the whole control thing. Birth plan. So whenever you have an epidural, it is harder if you have a specific birth plan if this is important to you, that you want certain things done. For instance, I wanted her cord to stay on longer, and like a couple of different things. It is harder when you have an epidural for them to follow your birthing plan, if they even want to. In my case, my doctors just didn't care. But even if they want to and they respect your wishes, it's harder for them to do depending on what it is if you have an epidural. It's actually scientifically proven, and a lot of these that I have written down are be scientifically proven, and I'll let y'all know which one those are. I did do a little research too. That it's easier to tear when you have an epidural, again because you can't feel what you're doing, and they can't coach you on the effective pushes and how to push effectively where you won't tear. So it is easier and more likely to tear. You are more likely to tear when you have an epidural. And just the last one for cons I have for an epidural is your recovery is harder. Like, it just is. That's why you have to stay in a hospital so long, is because you were on a serious medication. I mean, you're paralyzed from your waist down. They just put a lot of medicine through your IV. They want to make sure everything is okay with you and baby. But you're really staying in there the 2 days more for you than the baby. And my hair actually started to fall out months after I had the epidural. So recovery wise, it's just honestly so much harder. I had back pains for a year after I had the epidural, and it was right in that specific spot. So recovery is just horrendous, especially when you come home, and since you are more likely to tear, that recovery, tearing versus not tearing, is completely different. I'm telling you, I will get more into that in my postpartum update, but just we'll leave it at that. Like, recovery is 100 times worse when you have the epidural. So that is the pros and my cons of epidural. And I know some people like just straight rather have an epidural. People love their epidural, and that's fine. I should have said this at the beginning of the video, but I do want to say that I am not trying to push natural birth on y'all. I'm just a huge advocate now that I have done it and have went through it, that I 110% believe that your body is made for this. You can absolutely do it if you want to. And since I had the experience I did with my hospital birth with Lakeland, I know for a fact, and just with talking to like my midwives and stuff, the doctors really do a lot of unnecessary things medically, that they just want to feel like the hero, or they just want to, they're really impatient and want to speed things up. So yeah, just definitely pro natural birth now. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the pros and cons of natural birth. So we can start off with the pros. The pros for me, that was one, faster to go home. I love the fact that I got to stay with my baby on my chest constantly. She did not move off of my chest. We just kind of relaxed, and my mom and Blakeland and Mason got to visit with her, and then I got to take a shower and go home after everything is checked out with us. After 6 hours, that's whenever your bleeding starts to slow down, and once they see that you're not bleeding uncontrollably or anything, and baby's doing good with her vital rates and her sugar was low and everything, that y'all are able to go home. And then a midwife actually does a house call 24 hours after, or in my case, she just called me and made sure everything was okay, because I did live a little farther away from the birthing center. And then the next one I says is that you can absolutely feel everything you're doing, and I love that. I love the fact that I could actually feel when my contractions were. I love the fact that I actually got a break with my epidural. I had Pitocin because I wasn't dilating, aka they were just trying to rush my labor. So I had Pitocin, and I didn't get that break in between contractions. And this birth was just so different in that I felt every contractions. I felt my rest period where I got to relax and lay my head on the tub and just like soak in that moment of peace. I got to feel how I was pushing. I got to feel my ineffective pushes versus when I was pushing really good and I could tell that she was going down. I got to feel whenever like her head was right there. It was just an overall amazing experience, and I love the fact that I got to feel all that, and love the fact that I got to know what was going on, so I could basically get her out by myself. You're able to move around during labor. This was a huge one for me. I was not allowed that in the hospital, and keep in mind, I did go 17 out of 21 hours completely natural without an epidural, and I was confined to a hospital bed, not having any rest periods during contractions. So the fact that I was able to move around and walk and push against walls, and Mason was actually able to like put pressure on my hips, was a huge part in my success. I couldn't imagine it if I was unable to move around. I just could not have done it if I was confined to the bed. So the fact that I was able to move around during my labor was definitely a huge pro for me. The next pro I have was I didn't tear. Just because my midwife was able to coach me through my pushes and tell me when to stop and when to, like she was able to look down there and say, okay, slow down, because if you keep on pushing, you're gonna tear. But she was able to coach me through it and just tell me what I was doing. So that was really awesome. And it's, again, scientifically proven that if you do a natural birth, you are in a lower chance or lower risk to tear. So that's a little fun fact for you guys. And another scientifically proven pro that I have is it is scientifically proven that your labor is going to be faster without any medical interventions, because your body knows what it's doing. It's made for this, and it recognizes I'm in labor, my body's starting to dilate, I'm going to do is what I can to as quickly get this baby out so I'm in as less pain as possible. That's just how our bodies are naturally designed to do. So it's just proven that your labor will go faster without any medical interventions. Everyone isn't in and out. So the hospital, I know that everyone was constantly in and out, taking my vitals, doing this, checking the babies, pricking the baby, taking the baby away for this, doing this, doing this. With a birthing center, that is not the case. They come in every hour, check the baby's vitals, check your vitals, and they completely leave you alone. They just let you do your thing. Same with labor. While you're in labor, they're not constantly, if you want them there too. Now, whenever you get in the water, it is like a law that they have to be in there while you're in the water. But as far as while you're walking around, or if you didn't want to do a water birth, then they didn't actually have to be in there with you unless you were pushing the baby out. So just the sense of peace, and if you're more of a person that likes to do things on your own, and again, this is more of a birthing center pro. This is not necessarily a natural. I'm not sure if it would be the same in a hospital, because again, all I have experience from is a natural birth in a birthing center. But for the birthing center pro, definitely everybody wasn't in and out bugging you constantly. And then the last one I have is my biggest pro. It is definitely more of a sense of accomplishment. Not that you're not accomplishing anything, any way you give birth, whether it's C-section. I think that's like the most amazing way to give birth. Like, that is a major surgery. And C-section, whether it's an epidural, that sense of accomplishment is always going to be there. But for me personally, it was just an even bigger sense of accomplishment that I put my mind to this, that I didn't want medical attention or interventions or anything, and I was able to do that. And just the sense of accomplishment I felt for that, I did not feel with the epidural. And then the only con I have of a natural birth, and again, if I would have done a natural birth in a hospital, I would have 0 cons. But the con is I had to do newborn tests. Since I did go through a birthing center, they didn't do things that they would for a newborn in a hospital. So the first week of her life, I was pretty much running around trying to get like her hearing test done, her PKU test done, going to a pediatrician like in 48 hours 2 times. So it was just a little crazy that I was responsible for having to do all of her testings. Again, if I would have done a natural birth at a hospital, I wouldn't have been responsible for all that. But I was at a birthing center, and again, I would do it again in a heartbeat. So obviously, definitely, I mean, like, y'all can see my lift, like, y'all, 110% I would do a natural birth in a heartbeat. I just can't fathom going through an epidural now that I have had a natural birth. So personally, that's just my personal preference. Again, I do have 3 questions for you guys. Again, I didn't answer all you guys' questions because some of them were like repeat questions, and then most of the questions I actually answered in my pros and cons. But if y'all still have any questions and I didn't answer it fully to the extent of y'all's question, I guess, just message me on Instagram. And I love talking about this. Like, this is all up my alley now. So the first question is, do you feel like a hospital pushes for things like an epidural to try to speed things up? And definitely, I kind of touched on this. Definitely, I did not need Pitocin. They were just, again, in a rush to speed things up with my hospital birth. They were just being impatient, and I definitely didn't need an epidural because I was already at a 7, and she said that her heart rate was dropping, and honestly, I think I was just young, and that just was not the case at all. My midwife actually got my records and was like, we just talked about that in my appointment one day, and doctors like to feel like the hero, and I personally do not think my epidural that they pushed me for was medically necessary. I was just 19 and naive and didn't really know anything that was going on, and so yes, I definitely feel like they push things medically that are not necessarily at all to try to speed up the process and get you in and out. Would you still go natural if a birthing center wasn't an option? Absolutely. I could not imagine going back to an epidural. I will never again have an epidural. However, when I do have another baby, and if the birthing center isn't an option for us financially at that point in time, then I am definitely going to have to be doing my research with hospitals, and I don't think I would go back to a doctor. I think I would find a midwife again, just because that experience really was life-changing. So I think I would find a midwife and a hospital that I was able to follow my birthing plan as long as I can move around during my labor and not be confined to a bed, and have my IVs like portable, then absolutely I would have to find a hospital that would allow that, which there is. I know Ochsner and Baton Rouge definitely does. So yes, I would absolutely do it again. Could not imagine having an epidural after this birth. Did you notice you needed medical intervention one over the other? So with my epidural, again, I was told that I needed the epidural, but I don't personally think it was medically necessary. I think they just wanted to speed things up. And then with my natural birth, I did not have any medical intervention at all, like none. So I didn't feel like I needed medical intervention for either one of them. One, obviously I did have it, and the other I did not. So that is pretty much all my questions, and I hope you guys got something from this. If you're thinking about doing a natural birth or just want to kind of see the pros and cons of each one, it's definitely personal preference. And if you're anything like me and like that control freak, y'all, natural birth is probably for you. And again, if y'all have any questions and need some little encouragement, definitely reach out to me, because this is definitely something that I have really grown passionate about. And I would just love to talk to women about going natural if they are thinking about it. So never feel shy to ask me any questions. But I think that is it for this video. Little Miss is about to be waking up right on time to eat. So I will see you guys very soon. Make sure to subscribe down below if you haven't already, and give this video a big thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time.